Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Life podcast of Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here, not in person, though, with my co-host, Pastor Matt. Matt, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
Matt is joining us remotely today because you've got a sick kid at home, right?
What, man, I don't know. Yes, we're staying home today because he wasn't feeling well this morning. But the dude's like totally back to normal. But me being the kind and considerate parent that I am, I'm like, I'm going to keep him home just in case. I think it was something he just overate breakfast this morning.
Sure.
So, yeah, but he's in the other room right now. He's feeling fine. He's playing with his toys, singing songs. So if you hear him, that's, what's going on.
Hey, that's kind of fun. Well, hey, before we jump in, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you downloaded this. And if you're watching it on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let us know you saw us on YouTube. Now, we jump in as we always do with our news of the week. Matt, the news story that I was going to start with, kind of a tragic one. I'm not sure if you've heard about this yet, but there was a shooting last night in Maine. Did you hear much about this?
Yeah, I just saw an article about it last night when I was looking through the news. Like 18 people so far
At least
have died,
18.
I think, was the latest I heard. Yeah.
And they've got a suspect, but he is still at large, which is a little bit scary. Now, I know that they've shut down schools and there's a lot of people in the hospital. He went to 3 different locations. It sounds like a bar, a bowling alley. And they're also reporting that he was like a firearms instructor in the military. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's not a good situation. Obviously, it's, as a church and as Christians, it's something for us to be praying for. But I think it kind of brings up, and we've talked about this before, and maybe we'll do a full podcast episode at some point, but it's like, what is the relationship that Christians should have with guns? Because automatically, this is going to pull in the entire firearms debate, I think. As soon as there's any type of a shooting. That's kind of where it goes.
All the time. Yep. It doesn't matter how, what, or who. Anytime there's gun violence, it pretty much becomes a conversation about, well, see, this is why guns shouldn't exist type of thing, or why we shouldn't be allowed to own them. There's a lot to that. I think ultimately, like, our response right now is, we grieve for those who have lost family members and loved ones and friends. But recognize that even in the darkest times, like, God is still in control of it all. And so as Christians, we have a hope beyond the evil that's in this world. Definitely, showing compassion. I think now is the worst opportunity to turn a mass shooting into a political discussion, right? It's an opportunity as Christians for us to show love and compassion to people.
Yeah. And I think when people, if they say, well, if you're not going to do it now, whenever will you have that conversation?
Right.
But I think it's a fair point. And so, like I said, I think this might be an episode at a full discussion on, the pros and cons and what it looks like as a Christian to own a gun and what our relationship should be with that. But the other news, did you have anything that jumped out at you this week, Matt?
Just another, just tragedy, a big hurricane hitting Acapulco area in Mexico. At least 27 are dead so far from that as well. So just another, devastation type of thing that's going on. So just lots of opportunities to be praying for people and share Christ with them, because, time is obviously short. We don't necessarily know how much time we still have left. And so,
Well, and, speaking of just things that are happening, it's like Israel, there's still the continued conflict over there. It's just a lot. There's a lot right now. And I think it's one of those we've talked about this, where it's like, is there more conflict, more violence? Is there more of these things, or do we just now have more awareness of them? Because I think it might be, if you look statistically, at the latter. that we're actually safer than we've ever been. There's actually less crime. There's less violence. There's less starvation. You know, people are living longer, living healthier, disease, like famine. Like all of those things are trending down. But at the same time, our ability to communicate has skyrocketed so much that whereas before we were just ignorant of all the problems, now we know everything that's happening. So it feels like things get worse.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think, you know, you go from a time where we only got our news via newspaper, like the next day.
Right.
And the newspaper companies have a limited number of pages. So they're only going to pick the top like 10 big stories.
Right.
Whereas now I get to hear and see the second it happens, every single story. And so it's totally changed the way that we consume news. And I think there's pros and cons to it, right? The pro is we're in the know for everything, but the con is we're in the know for everything. And so it immediately like brings up this fear, like everything's ending and, you know, the world just stinks. We're going to hell in a handbasket type of thing, like just super fast and all those types of situations that happen. Where then all of a sudden it's really funny. My mother-in-law, if she's listening, I apologize for calling you out on this, but there was a period of time where like any time, like after we moved to Colorado, there was a bad thing that happened within like 50 miles of us. We would get a text or an email linking to that news article online. I'm like, did you know this happened? Is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, that's, I mean, you live in Southern California.
Right.
Like, have you looked at your news lately? Come on, man. And so it was just kind of funny, but it's because we have this just quick consumption of all the news and everything bad that happens. It elevates, I think, our fear a lot of times.
I think you're right. And I'm thinking back, as you mentioned that, to like a newspaper. And it's like we used to have, you know, the front page where all the big nationwide stories were. But then there was always like a local section. And it'd be like, here's some local stories that might interest you. But those would never spread out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Whereas now you can get that story anywhere. If somebody does something here, like it takes a lot. Back then, it would take a lot for a local story to make it to the nationwide level. But now it can very easily. Right. So I think you're right. It's probably, you know, just we know about it more. And so there's good and bad to it.
We know. Yeah. Yep.
Well, let's jump into our main topic today. Why waste any more time talking about anything other than this really timely discussion? And
speaking of fear,
speaking of scary things, we're going to talk about Halloween. Ooh, I made a fun noise like that. See, ooh. That's my Halloween sound. I hope you like it. The question that we want to talk about today is is it okay for a Christian to celebrate Halloween? And so go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to thank you for clarifying that statement at the beginning, because I think should Christians celebrate Halloween is a really silly question to ask. And I've seen it like all over, like every podcast, every blog, it's all should they celebrate Halloween? And I don't think should has anything to do with it.
Right, because should would imply like that is something that is a good thing for you to do. Like as a Christian,
right,
I am required to celebrate Halloween,
right? Almost
or
like
not.
Commanded.
Right. Should implies like a commandment, whereas can is if you want to. Is it permissible as a Christian to celebrate Halloween? And when we say that, I guess we could even define what we mean by Halloween, because there's going to be different points of view. Like, well, I celebrate Harvest Festival and we go and just do that and nothing else. But it happens to be on October 31st. So, so Matt, I mean, right now, like you've said, this is kind of everywhere. And I've seen all around TikTok and online Christians saying, no, it is absolutely unacceptable for a Christian to participate in any way with Halloween.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I think we should be really careful when we project that type of stuff universally.
Okay.
And, you know, because we'll get into this discussion a little bit more, I'm sure. So I don't want I don't want to give away too much yet, right? I want our listeners to stick around a little longer. But this seems like, because it's such a controversial subject, and one where you have Jesus loving, Bible believing Christians on both sides of the conversation to project my views and say, you have to think the same way I do, is a pretty bold statement. And so we really need to make sure that we are 100% confident that Scripture says that, rather than just me personally.
So, Matt, let me ask you this, and I'll maybe share a little bit as well. What is your, maybe the best word would be, history with Halloween? Like, as a kid, did you celebrate it? Did you trick or treat? What was your perspective growing up?
Yeah, no, I did celebrate it growing up. Celebrate is a weird word. I participated in it. We had pumpkins, we carved jack-o'-lanterns. I dressed up in fun costumes and got a bunch of free candy, which was awesome.
That sounds amazing. So I'll tell you from on my perspective, I did not. I was not allowed to celebrate Halloween as a kid. The first time I ever had any experience trick-or-treating was taking my own kids trick-or-treating when they got big enough. And so as a kid, I never once trick-or-treated. I never once did anything. In fact, I think we would go out to dinner, and, my parents would buy me some candy, which was nice. I'd at least get some candy, but I never once dressed up and went door to door. Now, I will say, in kindergarten, they were doing like a costume parade at our school. And so I was allowed to do that 1 year. I don't think I ever did it again after that. And I don't know if we just didn't do them, if it was only a kindergarten thing. I can't remember. But I do remember in kindergarten getting to change into, I didn't even get to wear it to school. I had to bring it to school with me. And I had to change into a Superman costume and then get to do a little costume parade. But I also remember, maybe this is why it sticks out so hard in my mind, is that the Superman pants were too big for me at the time. And so my parents sent me with some suspenders. They were like cow suspenders. Like, they had cows all over them. And they're like, all right, just put the suspenders on under the shirt. Like, when you go to change, put the pants on, put the suspenders on, pull the Superman shirt over it. And here's the thing. I'm weird about stuff on my skin. And I was like, no, I can't. I got to school and I'm like, I can't like I can't have a sleeve only like here, like halfway up my arm. It has to be all the way up or all the way down. I can't do it part way. I can't wear like a shirt like this without an undershirt. Like, it would just freak me out for some reason. I'm just weird about it. And so I think I put the suspenders on and I was like, nope, not doing this. So I wore them over it. And so I was Superman wearing cow suspenders for the Halloween parade that year. And never.
You were probably the hit of the parade.
I don't know what the response was, but I know when I got home, they said, so how did it go? And I'm like, well, I wore the suspenders like that. And they're like, wait, what? Why? It's like, well, that's how I wanted. So that's my history with Halloween.
Funny. That's funny.
Now, did you ever, as part of a Halloween prank, like egg someone's house or TP someone's house?
I did not.
You never did. I never did either. But I didn't do anything on Halloween. Nope. But even outside of Halloween, I never did that. But it's kind of funny because that's
Halloween for me was never really about like the tricks and the pranks.
Okay.
I never had that. I never like heard about that from friends. That, oh man, even like in middle school and high school, it wasn't, hey, we're gonna go egg this person's house on Halloween.
Right.
That day didn't stand out as like a special day to do bad things.
Right.
If they were bad people, they were going to do bad things whenever they wanted to.
Right.
Now, TPing, when I was in high school, we did that all the time to our friend's house, and we had it done to us, and it was fun. It was never like we're mad at each other.
Oh,
it was
good.
always hilarious. Our parents supported us in going out and doing it. It was really cool. So we would have to get tricky and sneaky because, we knew that, every weekend someone's going to get it.
Oh,
so
that's funny. Yeah. Well, okay, so let's circle back then to Halloween because there's a lot, like you said, a lot of stuff out there saying like it's absolutely wrong. When you hear people say that, what general justifications do you hear? Because we are allowed to make, like you said, it's a sweeping statement. It's always wrong, but we can do that on things
right
biblically, like, let's pick the obvious. Like, it's always, murder's wrong, right? We can make that sweeping generalization that no Christian should participate in murder. Okay. I think we're all okay with that. So,
and we can say that because scripture says, do not murder.
Right. Like you said, it's highly backed up. So when you hear people saying Halloween is, you cannot as a Christian celebrate it, what justification have you heard?
Yeah. So the one that stands out the most that I've heard a lot is that's Satan's holiday. And so we shouldn't participate in it.
Okay.
And so I have a reaction to that when people say that.
Yeah.
Do you want that now, or are we saving that?
No.
Okay.
Why would we? So, let's hear it. What's your? So somebody says no, you can't do Halloween. It's Satan's holiday.
Yeah, I was like, wow, I didn't realize you like gave him that much support and recognition.
Yeah.
Like that's my initial response is like this is the day, including October 31st, the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Right.
Like Satan doesn't get a day. Every day belongs to the one who created it, and that's to God. And so I'm going to rejoice and celebrate him no matter what day it is. And I'm not going to give Satan that much power and control over my life to say, this is your day. I'm going to go hide in a corner until your day is done. Then I'll come back out. Like, no, this is the Lord's day. Satan, you go hide in a hole because you should be afraid of me.
I love that. So I think that's 100% right. And the same thing when I hear people making arguments against any Christian celebration of it, they generally always tie it back in to the Celtic Samhain festival.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest arguments I've always heard. It's like, well, it's this pagan holiday. It's Samhain, which was this, big, massive Satan worshiping. The spirits are out and we need to do all this stuff. And so I was trying to do some research on that. Because it seems like, and now one thing that I guess we can clarify when we talk about Samhain, it's because it's like Celtic, it's spelled very differently. So you'll see it as like Samhain. It's like Samhain, which sounds like a cool name for like a private eye. Samhain, private eye.
I was thinking like that was Hobbit's name.
Samwise Haining.
Hain. I don't know.
But Sam Hain. That's what we're talking about, Samhain. And I did find one, it's like this very old Celtic text that describes the Samhain festival it almost seems like Christian intervention at all. This is a long time.
Yeah.
And the quote was, nor there was anything in the world they would do at that time except sports and marketing, which I don't like, maybe selling stuff, and splendors and pomp and feasting and eating. And it is from that custom of theirs that the festival of the Samhain has descended. So this guy was talking about a 7-day festival that really in no way resembles our Halloween.
Huh.
And I think that's really interesting because to me, if that's how that started, I feel like a lot of our traditions and cultures and ideas around Halloween are much, much later than the actual time of like when the Samhain festival. And now that Samhain festival is always a fall festival. It's like celebrating the end of summer and the beginning of winter.
It's like the way I had always heard it was it celebrates kind of the end of the harvest season. When your crops now, this is the final one, they're not going to grow anymore. So like maybe that's where the death element comes from because we're like, there's no more life at this point in our season in our crops. And so, but yeah, it's just a really interesting that quote you found.
Yeah.
I like it. It actually sounds kind of fun. Celebrating like lots of eating.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Feasting.
Right. It wasn't even,
I like sports.
It didn't even seem to have like a spiritual or religious connotation as much until the 12th century. And that's when it seems like there started to, be some more kind of pulling in of like the spirit world is getting more accessible on this night and things like that. And I think the thing that gets tricky about this is that as with a lot of stuff, we in our America 21st century culture have so much of multiple cultures and ideas and practices that have all blended and changed. And so when we start to look at the history of things, it can just get a little bit muddy because, like, why, when people say, well, Halloween is descended from the Samhain festival, but it's not. Like, Halloween, by its definition, was a Christian holiday to begin with.
Okay.
Because
what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so November 1st in the Christian world was always celebrated as All Saints Day, right? A day to celebrate the saints. Now, it wasn't always November 1st. This is another thing that's kind of funny. When Samhain had started, and I had some quotes, a quote on this as well, where it looks like medieval Ireland celebrated All Saints on April 20th. So in medieval times, like early Christianity coming into Ireland, they were celebrating All Saints later in April. And so they really didn't have a connection to the Samhain holiday. It was only later on when Germany and other places who celebrated All Saints Day on November 1st started to spread that it kind of moved around, and eventually everybody started celebrating All Saints Day as a day to celebrate the saints in the Christian church, right? So November 1st is All Saints Day.
Yeah, I think it was 9th century that Pope Gregory decreed that it would be celebrated on that November 1st.
Right.
As opposed to around springtime.
Right. And so then the day before is just All Hallows Eve, right? Saints Day is a hallowed holy day. It's a holiday. And so the night before was just the eve of that. So Halloween, by its definition, began as a Christian holiday in the sense that it was the day before the holy day of All Saints. Now, this is where I was saying before, all of our ideas and culture and traditions start to muddy up, because now you have to start talking about, well, when did trick-or-treating start and where did that come from? Where was candy? Why are there witches and ghouls and goblins? Like, all these other pieces have started to come into it. But if the idea is, well, it's a pagan holiday and so we shouldn't have anything to do with it, I think that gets us into really dicey territory. And some Christians will take this route, because then you're going to lose Christmas. You're going to not celebrate the resurrection. Like, all of these things are in proximity to pagan holidays.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like we tend to, as Christians, see that there's a pagan holiday and be like, I'm taking that over. Like, that's going to be mine. So then we blend, and this happened, like you were saying, in more ancient times, many, many years ago, right? And so you now, thousands potentially of years later, or at least several hundred years later, we have this weird little blending that has gone on from some of our rooted in scripture traditions and are rooted in just cultural traditions, and those kind of blend a little bit. And really there's no like definition of what is what anymore. And with Halloween, I could find sources to back up whatever side of the argument I want to be on.
Right.
Like, I can find how dark the beginnings of Halloween are and how it's rooted in, like, not just using the word pagan, but demonic rituals and satanic rituals and in Wiccan things and all this. I could find all of that proves that Halloween is evil. But then I can also go back and find all the things that, no, it's a celebration of All Saints Day. It's a Christian festival that we're using and celebrating around the same time as some of that other stuff that goes on. And so, it's just really interesting how we, and I use we collectively, but as just people, we don't really care what is actually true. We just want to find arguments that agree with me. And it's sad that we live in a culture like that where we're not pursuing truth. Instead, we just want to argue an opinion. So I'm going to find someone else that agrees with me so I can have a better argument.
Yeah. And, actually want to cut real quick to a email we got. Cut's the weird word. I'm going to read an email we got on this topic as well. As always, you too can be a part of our conversation. Email podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com, just like our good friend Jeremiah did. because we'd asked last week, what do you think? Is it okay for Christians to celebrate Halloween? And we kind of were just talking about this. So I thought, he says, if it is wrong for Christians to celebrate Halloween, we should not be doing trunk or treat. It's similar to celebrating Christmas. Jesus was not born on December. Santa, which is an anagram for Satan and based on Krampus, with a decent historical challenges to St. Nick. But that's for our Christmas episode, which, spoiler alert, we are going to do a Christmas episode all about Christmas myths. Christmas trees, which come from Norse fertility tradition, etc. But we as Christians happily participate in many of these items. Historical content for All Hallows Eve are interesting and also curious how few celebrate Halloween around the world. It seems to be much more of an American, not Western tradition. I asked about celebrating it in Germany, England, and Sweden, and they shared that it wasn't something they remembered from their childhood, but they are doing it now for their kids. So that's definitely an interesting thing. The American idea of Halloween, because I do think, like, for instance, we know that even like jack-o'-lanterns and things like that are not historically a Halloween. Carving pumpkins aren't historically for Halloween. That was something in America. Like, they would carve other vegetables, other root things, but pumpkins are distinctly
turnips, right? Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns were turnips. I think we had that on like a DSM like trivia game once, but like the pumpkin is an American vegetable, isn't it? Do they have pumpkins around the world before America? Oh man, somebody should fact check that. But I'm pretty sure Americans were gaining prominence as a carving for Halloween type thing in America. So that's where pumpkins came from. And so it is interesting that there's a lot of stuff we celebrate, and a lot of times as Christians, our response has been take it, renew it, make it something good. But with Halloween, it's like we give up. It's like, no, that one, it's just too evil. There's nothing good to be pulled from it. I don't know.
Really interesting.
I think that, they'll say things like, well, there's just no way. Like, I saw a video on TikTok. They're like, even if somebody was like, that's no matter what, it's wrong. You're celebrating death. You're celebrating evil because that's what people are. And somebody else on this video said, well, what about my kid just dresses up as Spider-Man and gets candy? What's wrong with that? And the person said, well, even if they just are doing that, there's no way for them to avoid seeing other people dressed up as bad things. And so it's a sin. And I thought, dang, like if I even see somebody else doing something wrong, I've now sinned.
You sinned.
That is a hot take.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just kind of blew me away. And then the other thing that I've heard a lot of people say is like, well, did you know that Satanists will pray over the candy? Like, I don't know if they're sitting in the factories or something like that, but they'll say, I talked to somebody who was a former Satanist, and they said, we're going to pray over this candy and we're going to make it cursed. So even eating the candy is going to let you be a partaker of evil. What do you think about that, Matt? Is this a danger? Do you kind of do you like pray over it with God to kind of like purify the candy when your kids bring it home? Or
right. Here's the thing. As Christians, if I'm really worried that a Satanist praying over candy is actually going to change the candy and how it affects my body, I have other issues in my relationship with God beyond that, because like I don't believe in the power of prayer to Satan. I believe in the power of prayer to God. So just speaking words over something, I'm not afraid of it.
Right.
Like I'm not going to live, and scripture talks about this, right? Like we're not to have a spirit of fear, 2 Timothy 1:7, right? But like of power and of love and of self-control. And so if I'm living in fear over someone praying a curse over my candy, that's interesting. I don't know. It seems, maybe it happens. I've never experienced it.
Yeah, it's like, I thought two things when I saw that. I thought, first of all, let's say that first of all, there's no evidence of that. That doesn't seem like it's a real thing. It seems like a made up thing. I've never found any documented cases where that's happening. But second of all, like you said, even if it was, why would we be afraid of that as Christians?
Right.
With God on our side, why would that worry me? Why would that be something? And so I guess the concern would be then you're associating with something that's evil.
Right.
All right, we've
Yeah,
got
no, there's...
Sorry, I was going to say, we got a note from our producer. Pumpkins originated in North America about 9,000 years ago. The oldest pumpkin seeds have been found in Mexico. No European use until the 1500s. So there you go. That's kind of fun. All right, so what were you going to say?
I don't remember.
We lost the train of. So I think we're talking about, what are Satanists doing? And like, there's this fake, I'm going to spoilers ahead, a fake quote that goes around this time of year with Anton LaVey, who is like the head of, like the author of the Satanic Bible, famous Satanist.
Yeah.
And there's a quote from him that goes around this time of year where he says, I want to thank all the Christians for letting their kids celebrate this satanic holiday with us. It's the best thing we can do for them or something like that. And it's like, that's not even there's no evidence of that ever being said by the guy. And it's kind of funny.
So that is a fake quote.
Yeah. That I've
Interesting.
I've not found any evidence of that actually being said by Anton LaVey.
One of the podcasts I listened to last week, they had a pastor on as a guest person talking about why you should not, as a Christian, celebrate Halloween.
Yeah.
And he used that quote and said, see, the Satanists love this day and know that Satan uses it against you as Christians when you do anything as a part of it. So the fact that quote has no grounds in reality is interesting.
And someone, if you've got a documented evidence of that quote, if you're listening right now, you're like, well, I'm pretty sure that was real. Like, I would love to see documentation. I've yet to find it myself that he ever said that. So I think it's one of those repeated things. It's like totally different subject, but it's like a lot of times Christians will say, Darwin repented and recanted everything about evolution on his deathbed, and it's like that never happened. That's just a made up thing that we've said. Like,
but it sounds good.
we can debate the theories of evolution, but even if Darwin had said that, it doesn't change anything about the factual things of it. But that's a whole subject we don't need to go into today. I think that to me, and maybe this is kind of like a big, I go to this passage a lot, but I think because it's relevant, I think the big scriptural thing I look at will be the whole concept of the food sacrificed to idols. Because Paul, and so if you're unaware of this passage, a quick little context of it, Paul is talking about this question that has come up in the early church, which is, what do we do with food that has been sacrificed in pagan temples? So Paul, culturally speaking, what happens? Well, there's temples to Zeus and Aphrodite or whoever in ancient Rome and all the cities around it. And they'll go and they'll slaughter a cow in honor of Zeus and they'll burn it up. And then after the sacrifice and after the offering, it goes out to the market as like a discounted meat. Okay. And so Christians are very concerned. It's almost like we've never changed. They're like, hey, Paul or whoever, what do we do about this? Because this was part of a pagan ritual. And we know Paul has said that people who pray to idols are praying to demons. So not only are these pagan rituals, these are demonic sacrifices. These are things that have been done in the name of demons, essentially, and given up as part of this. And then by purchasing that meat, not only are you now implicitly partaking in something that was used in a pagan ceremony, but you're financially supporting them to continue doing it. Like, there's a lot going on here. And so what does Paul say? Paul says, well, you need to look at yourself. You need to examine your conscience and say, look, meat is meat. If it doesn't bug you, eat it. Like, you get a good deal on your barbecue today, so go for it. It's not going to bug you. Now, some people, maybe they come out of a pagan background. Maybe they've got a connection where purchasing that meat, partaking in that meal will remind them of their pagan origins and cause them to kind of dwell into that. Paul says, don't do it then. That's going to be a sin for you. It's a weird instance where we do have almost like a moral gray area where something can be relative, where it can be a sin for one person and perfectly fine for another, because it's about where you are, where your heart is. It's on an unclear issue. And so I don't think you could find a better analogy and principle to Halloween than that, because it's
Right.
pagan festivals, partaking in things for demons. But maybe for me, as not a Satanist, if I want to have my kids dress up in silly outfits and get candy, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It's a matter of Christian conscience, right? And our Christian liberty. And so and I think that's where I would land on this. I personally, with my family, we partake in the Halloween celebrations. In fact, if you look over my shoulder here, you'll see some jack-o'-lanterns and like ghosts on some paintings on the wall. My son and my third-born son and I, we painted these a couple weeks ago from like a TikTok trend that was happening where you buy thrift store paintings and then you kind of spookify them a little bit for Halloween.
Oh, that's fun.
And I'm in the camp of, I actually really like spooky. I don't like horror very much. I don't like gory type stuff, but I love spooky.
Yeah.
And so like spooky season, as we call this time, it's really fun for me because I'm not afraid of death.
Right.
That as a Christian, I have no fear of that. And I'm actually regularly reminded of during Halloween how valuable the gift of life is.
Right.
Right. You drive by, you see like tombstones in people's yards or skeletons or whatever it might be. And it's a reminder that, man, life is short.
Yeah.
And our life that we have is a gift from God. What am I doing with it? And so for me, if you don't mind, I'll share like my convictions of what my family does on Halloween.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what you were talking about with Paul, this is a matter of Christian liberty. And so this works for my family and it might not work for your family. And guess what? I'm not going to judge you for that.
Right.
Because there's nothing in scripture that says you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. And so we use everything we have, and I stand with a clear conscience before God with the way that we celebrate it. And so I'll decorate my house. I have some jack-o'-lanterns and candles, and I actually do like the projection singing pumpkins because that's just really fun as well. I invite people over to my house. We sit in our driveway. We put up a fire pit. I have hot chocolate for people and obviously lots of candy. And I greet everyone. I have my lights on as much as I can. I greet everybody that comes in. And it is the one day in the year where I have people who don't know Jesus walking up to my door.
I love that.
And so I have this opportunity to meet people in my neighborhood that I would otherwise have no opportunity to do so. I actually will, as each person comes up, quietly in the silence of my heart, pray for them as I'm greeting them and say, God, use this as an opportunity to develop a relationship with these people. Might they see Christ through my family? Even in the midst of my silly Halloween decorations I might put up, like I have the opportunity to love and be good news to my neighborhood, right? A light in the darkness, as we're called to be in scripture. And so for me, it is a matter of, there is no other time where I have this many people coming to my door and I have the opportunity to make eye contact with them, greet them warmly and friendly. Here's the thing. Growing up, when I was trick-or-treating, I knew which families were Christians. They were the ones who I could see a light on in their house, but they were not answering their door.
Yep.
Right? Or like they heard a knock or a doorbell and all of a sudden lights go out. And I'm like, right? So as like a kid, I was like, stupid Christians.
Yep.
Now, I grew up in a Christian family. I placed my faith in Jesus when I was 8 years old. So like I was one of those people, but I was so mad at them for shutting their lights off.
Right.
When little kids dressed up as superheroes and princesses and all these different things are coming to their door for a piece of candy, like, man, I want these people to know you're welcomed and accepted and I love you. And here's some free candy and some hot cocoa. Let me be generous with my time and my resources tonight. And maybe someday, because they see me walking around in my church-themed clothing, or they'll see me handing out flyers, which I do, to like our Easter services. Maybe that leads to a conversation. Like I have an opportunity. I'm not giving Satan a foothold on this night. I am taking it and saying, God, how can you use me and my family in this moment to reach my neighborhood?
I love that. I think it's interesting. You talk about, these were, you could tell which houses were the Christian houses. And I'm reminded of a couple things. I used to work, as many of you might know, for a long time, I worked in the movie theater industry. And whenever there was a Christian movie playing, my staff would be so upset not because there was a Christian movie, because they knew the Christians would be coming to the theater, and they were usually the rudest customers to them, left the biggest messes, and acted the most entitled. And it's like,
Yep.
that's our witness to the world. And that's similar
Yeah.
with this. It's like a day where it's like fun, candy for kids, and we're going to be very clearly home, but just not interacting. Like that's the message. And it was making me think, and I don't really have an answer to this right now, because I just thought of it right now, but I wonder if Christians have always been against Halloween, or if this is a more modern, because part of me thinks, just knowing the general trajectory of cultural Christianity in America in the past 100 or so years, part of me wonders if it all really started in like late 70s, 80s, because that's when we started to see, what they call the satanic panic. And we started to see this pushback against anything and everything that seemed like it might have some sort of like quote unquote satanic presence in it. And so I wonder where...
I'm pretty confident it started in the 80s, Nathan, where the anti-Halloween sentiment among Christians grew. Because... Well, and the way we celebrate Halloween in America also started growing and changing.
Sure.
As we become more consumeristic, and it becomes more of a consumer-driven holiday, right? The amount of the billions of dollars that are spent on candy every year, the money that's spent on costumes and decorations and all that, it's very much like most of our holidays in America. It's all about the almighty dollar. But I think throughout the 80s, there was a lot of prominent religious leaders who said, if you participate in this, your children will be corrupted. You were turning them over to Satan. And so those prominent Christian leaders, they're the same ones who said you have to cancel everything that is not Christian based, right? It was really the beginning of our cancel culture as well. It feels like it was kind of in that same era. And so I think it's relatively new in the grand scheme of history, the whole we can't participate in it.
That's interesting.
And again, if you have your own personal convictions of why you don't, that's fine.
Right.
But
I think that's key, right?
Yeah. But to blanket it on everyone and say no one's allowed to do this, I think that's wrong. Like for me, I'll use a phrase I've heard a lot. It's this idea of living with missional intentionality. And I know that word intentional, you guys like to mock me for using it, but like I'm a missionary. You're a missionary. Like every single Christ follower is a missionary in the context that God has placed them in. So in my neighborhood, I have the opportunity to be a missionary. And so I want to live in a way where I use every opportunity given to me to share that with people, right? To share Christ with others, to be a light in the darkness. Now, I'm not going to be the person, and I will say, no matter what your convictions are on Halloween, please don't be the house that is only handing out a tract of why Halloween should turn to Jesus, because I guarantee you that's going to make them turn from Jesus, not towards him. Now, if you want to hand out candy and give them something that points them towards Christ, great. Just make it a king-size candy bar.
Right. Matt, that made me remember how there's restaurants, and, when Christians go there, they'll leave it looks like a folded up 20 or something, and it's actually a tract. And it's like, that is the probably worst witness you can leave somebody, because you think you're getting, the waiter thinks, hey, they left me a good tip. They open up the money, and instead of a tip, they've got that. And it's like, yes, the gospel is more valuable than money. We all agree on that.
Absolutely. 100%.
Leaving that as your tip is the worst thing you can do.
So as Christians, we were created in the image of God, right? Like all people, we're created in the image of God, who is the most creative, the most generous, the most loving being of all time. If we're created in his image and we claim to be Christ followers, shouldn't we be the most creative, the most generous, and the most loving people on the planet?
Yes. It seems pretty
Always. Yeah, my wife was a waitress for a while, and she didn't frequently work Sundays, but all her coworkers hated Sundays because the after church crowd would come, and they were loud and messy and not generous. And it's that same thing of like, terrible. Man, let's turn the tide on that. Let's be as generous as we can, even on Halloween. Let's maybe share the love of Jesus somehow with them in that moment, or other options. Like there's so many options. We can be so creative with what we do, but not at the expense of being a killjoy.
Right. I think that's good.
Like, that's not how God created us.
Well, as we
have people show up to our house.
Yeah. So I think as we kind of close out this topic, I think that's kind of a good place to leave it. Like, if you can feel comfortable celebrating Halloween and using it as a way to redeem it and move forward with it, go for it. Obviously, don't partake in evil things. If dressing up as Satan, maybe not the best idea. But
Ouija boards, pulling pranks on people, participating in sinful acts, whether Halloween or not, is still sin, and so that absolutely don't participate in.
Right, and you know what? If you've got a strong personal conviction that you don't want to associate with it, don't. That's fine, but don't sit in like judgment of every other Christian who has decided a different path than you on it. Like, we have grace with each other. We bear up with each other. We have love and mercy for each other in the church. Like, let's practice that above anything else.
Right. And like for me, it comes down to John 1:5, right? The light shines in the darkness. A lot of people say, well, Halloween, it's such a dark night. Awesome. I'm going to shine even brighter in that moment, right? My generosity and my love is going to shine even brighter that night. And hey, if you guys don't want to do anything at your house, you can come hang out at my house. Like, my driveway is open. I'll have plenty of chili and hot cocoa for anyone that comes by. I know they're only going to have a couple days before Halloween when this is released, but if you don't feel comfortable doing it at your house, you're welcome to come hang out with me and help me shine brightly.
Well, with that, let's move on to my favorite segment, Ask the AI Anything. And today we have a pretty fun, it was a recommended. Now, this person, I'm letting them make a recommended pick, but they didn't sponsor us for GPT-4. So normally, to get your suggestions put in here, you can sponsor this segment by donating $20 for a month of GPT-4. We will give you a shout out. We'll let you pick a prompt, and we'll mention you every week that your sponsorship is there. So just email podcast@dfchurch.com if you're interested in that. Now, the prompt this week, though, was so good that I had to do it, which was, what are the top 10 Halloween costumes for Christians?
Oh, these are going to be so cheesy.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're going to be like, oh, this is like be David and Goliath and things like that. No. AI is unhinged. Here we go. Are you ready for this? Number 10, a pious penguin. Embrace your inner avian spirit by dressing as a penguin bishop, complete with a pointy hat and fish-shaped Bible.
I don't know what to do with that.
Oh, they get better. Are you ready for the next one?
I am a pious penguin.
I'm a pious penguin. Number 9, a hymn book head. Wear a giant hymn book on your head and serenade your fellow trick-or-treaters with classic hymns.
Salty the Psalm book.
Basically, just be Salty the singing psalm. No, that his whole body. Oh. He was the book. This is just your head.
He was the book.
The rest of your body's normal.
You know what? I'm going. I need to go the full distance.
Oh my goodness. Number 8. Number 8 is holy guacamole. Here's the description.
Oh, see, okay, these are getting fun because these are getting a little punny. I like it.
Become a giant avocado. And distribute guacamole as the holy sacrament of snack time. We might have gone a little too far. AI, you are unhinged today, and I love it.
This is awesome.
Number 7. Apostle alien. Wear a robe and sandals, but with a UFO hat to convince people you're an extraterrestrial disciple. What does that even mean? Oh, my goodness.
I don't know, but then have them listen to our podcast about aliens.
Yes, we have an episode all about aliens, and it's great. Listen to it. Number 6, a candy crusader. Dressed as a knight in shining armor with a shield made of candy wrappers, ready to protect your sweet loot.
All right. I mean, taste and see that the Lord is good. Maybe you can go
the Crusades.
that route.
Like you were a crusade, like, the Crusades.
But maybe the Crusades weren't necessarily the best thing to be reenacting.
All right. How about number 5 then? A prayer warrior. Don your armor of God, literally, and a foam sword to become a fearless defender of righteousness.
A foam sword.
Well, yeah, not a real one. It's a costume. What, you want to be? Okay. Here you go. Number 4. The 95 Theses. Carry around 95 Theses nailed to a cardboard door as a reference to Martin Luther. It's like a sandwich board. You're like, I'm the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. I love it. No. All right, number 3. Bible character mashup. Confuse everyone by blending Noah's Ark animals, Moses' staff, and David's sling to become a Testament transformer.
I was with it when it was the Bible character mashup. That could be kind of fun.
Okay, but not those specific mashups.
Yeah.
Number 2, a holy roller disco. Combine your faith with some funky dance moves by dressing as a disco dancing priest or nun. Actually, that one sounds really fun.
Wow.
I would do that. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
And number 1, oh my goodness, what? Number 1 of the top 10 Halloween costumes for Christians as generated by AI. A saintly spook. Dressed as a ghost, but with a halo and wings, because even ghouls need a little divine intervention. What?
Okay.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what to do with that. Like, so they're saying you're not just a ghost, but you're like a ghoul, like, but with a halo. It's like when you see the little angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, but you're just both.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So Nathan, let's turn this around. We asked the AI.
Yeah.
But what about like you? What do you think as a Christian would be a fun costume that is Christian, other than the David and Goliath? You dressing up as Goliath, your little kid dressing up as David type of thing. What would be another good one?
That's tough because whenever I think of costumes, I just try to think of funny stuff like, oh, I'm going to dress up as somebody from Pixar or something like, I go with silly stuff. But biblical costumes, I did for Trunk or Treat one year. I was Jesus, but the Book of Revelation Jesus. So I was like all in white with like crazy like glowing stuff, and that was kind of fun.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do. You could be like Noah's Ark and like drag a wagon behind you that's the ark that you put all your candy in, like the little animals. It'd be kind of funny. Mm-hmm. What about you?
What if, now this would be a deep take. If you're a larger man, potentially you can dress with like a robe and a crown and things like that, and maybe just cut off like the top part of a toy sword or something.
Oh my goodness.
And then kind of like strap it underneath the folds of some of the extra flap on your body.
Oh no. What
just
is
a little
name?
Ehud action.
Ehud was the assassin.
King Eglon, I think.
Eglon.
Yeah,
that's right.
King Eglon, I think.
If you went as King Eglon, nobody would know what you were.
Hilarious. Right, but it would be like a deep cut.
So
I think there's some kind of funny ones you could do of those lesser known Bible stories.
Here's a question. Would it be appropriate to dress up as something like demonic if it was biblical? Like, I want to be the guy who's possessed and roaming around the tombs hurting himself. Is that okay?
I don't know.
Because it's in the Bible.
Yeah. Here's where it comes down to it with like a Halloween conviction, right?
Okay.
Are you glorifying? Right. So I think like that's where like my decorations, my costumes, I'm going to try not to necessarily glorify evil. I don't mind spooky,
Right.
but if I'm dressing up as a demon possessed person, I don't know. I'd have to think on that and pray about that one a lot longer than 15 seconds.
Well,
But that's kind of fun.
If you're listening right now, email us podcast@dfchurch.com. Let us know your opinion on that. Is it okay to dress up as something biblical but still demony? And you can email us now. Again, I mentioned this letter we got from our friend Jeremiah earlier in the podcast, but there was more in the letter. So let's move into our listener mail segment. Again, email podcast@dfchurch.com and be a part of this conversation. So we talked about the Halloween part. He also mentions our Rabbi Jack episode last week. If you missed that one, we had our good friend Rabbi Jack Zimmerman talking all about the conflict in Israel and some of the historical roots. Jeremiah said it was a great episode that I have shared multiple times to share some of the historical context of the most recent conflict, praying for Jesus to come back quickly, as that is the only hope for Israel. Now, here is his question, and I think this is a good one, and I don't know how much you want to spend on this today, or maybe, again, we bring this up on a later podcast, because actually Lex and I were just talking about this same thing recently. He says, as we enter into the holidays, what level of self-sacrifice is called for? There's so much need, and it seems God isn't meeting them. Starving kids in Africa or even in Old Town. Families that are doing their best are struggling to make ends meet. Most importantly, people are going to hell and don't seem to care. If I'm one man, one family, and part of one small church, what are we to do? Should I sell everything? Is that a commandment for modern believers? And like I said, Lex and I were talking about this. We had a date night the other night, and we went out to one of our favorite restaurants. It was the Still Whiskey Steaks. It's a nice steak place. And we had a really nice dinner. And it's like, as a Christian, are we allowed to have nice things, enjoy nice things when there's so many people who are without? Like, what is our level of being okay with having good things when there's people who don't?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think this is also going to come down to a personal conviction type of moment. I think it all comes down to Christ followers being generous and focused on loving God and loving our neighbor. I don't think there's anywhere in Scripture that says the actual thing you have is bad.
Okay.
What it says in Scripture is the love of those things, or the focus on our stuff, is bad. So if I am hoarding my good, gifts that I have in my life, my stuff, my money, my good meals, whatever it is, and saying, ha ha ha, I'm going to have this, eat this, do that at the expense of others, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more than fine to go out and enjoy a nice meal. I think that's a blessing and a gift from God, and we need to recognize that. Right? I think every good and perfect gift comes from above, right? So all the good things you have in life, including stuff, not just your life itself, your family, your health, that type of stuff, but even your stuff is a gift from God.
Right.
But I need to be generous with that. And so I think the concept of like self-sacrifice, I think is what you said was in that question.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus modeled that, right? With the way that he lived. He served other people first, but he didn't deny his needs per se. And in fact, if you look at his death, when he was buried, he was in a very nice tomb that really the rich people got, right? Like Joseph of Arimathea, like it was a rich person's tomb. Now he was dead at that point, so he wasn't necessarily enjoying it in his life. But I think ultimately the key is, am I following Jesus?
Right.
Am I living my life for his glory?
Right.
And am I living with gratitude regularly for the things that he gives me? Because I think if so, I'm going to be generous.
Right.
Right. And I think it's great. And in America, this is the tricky part with that question. In America, we have a different standard of living than other countries do, right? We have nice houses here. We have full-size kitchens and a dining room and a living room and bedrooms that are all separate. It's not one common space for the entire extended family in. But with our homes, we can be generous with that. We can be hospitable with it. We can invite others and share the love of Christ through the stuff that we have. When you go out to eat, you're supporting local businesses and those families. And ideally, you're tipping very generously, right? You're being generous with the gifts that you have. And so,
Right.
no, I don't think it's wrong. I think the question of self-sacrifice isn't limited to the holidays. I think we think about it more during the holiday season because we're buying gifts for each other.
Right.
And so the encouragement is awesome. Buy gifts for your family, celebrate family, find a way to help out and celebrate someone else as well. Right. So like the homeless people in Old Town that question was talking about, find a way to go and serve them during the holiday season. Find ways to go and serve them not during the holiday season, because the holiday season is a trendy time to do it anyway, because it makes me feel better about myself.
Right.
Go and do it year round. That's why I love like our monthly sign pantry. It's an opportunity to give back to those who don't have as much as maybe you do. You're not hoarding your gifts over them. You're just serving one another humbly in love. Right. Galatians 5:14 talks about that and how it's all fulfilled in loving your neighbor as yourself. So, yeah, it's okay for us to have stuff, but we need to die to the love of that stuff.
I like it. And then we have one other email today. This came from Abby, and she asks us a question. If Jesus never sins, but his parents told him to do something that was against God's word, but he has to obey his parents, how would that work? So it's like it's like a paradox, right? He has to obey his parents because to not do so would be to sin, but his parents are asking him to sin, so to do that would be to sin. So how does he reconcile that?
Yeah, so obviously Jesus is without sin,
right?
And so with the obeying your parents thing, there's a part of Ephesians chapter 6 verse 1 that we often miss. Okay. Right? Especially as parents, we just say, obey your parents. Children, obey your parents. Sorry, I just shook my camera.
You're passionate about that.
Ephesians 6:1 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. So as a parent, my children are only required to obey me if I'm in line with God's commands, will, desires. If I am asking my children to sin, it is their responsibility to not obey me because I'm asking them to go contrary to what God has called them to. And that would be sin on their part to obey me, asking them to sin. Now, here's the difference. In Exodus, in the 10 Commandments, it says honor. Right. So there's a difference between honor and obedience, and this can be another topic. But the key with obeying the commands of my parents, it comes secondary to the commands of the Lord.
Perfect. Makes sense to me. Well, thanks again, those of you who wrote in. And again, take a minute, drop us a little note, podcast@dfchurch.com. Next week, our topic, if you want to let us know in advance what you think, we're kind of continuing, even though we'll be past Halloween, kind of our spooky theme of these couple episodes. And we're going to be talking about kind of spiritual matters. And so what I mean by that, what I've kind of tentatively called this episode, is it the devil or just a leaky pipe? And so my question is, and what I want us to talk about is, how do we know when there is demonic oppression, when there's Satan involved or demons involved in things? And how do we balance between seeing Satan under every bed sheet and pillow versus just the natural things of this world? When is it spiritual? When is it natural? How do those things all work together? So let us know what your thoughts are, any questions you might have in that topic. Again, podcast@dfchurch.com. And again, thank you, Matt, for joining us remotely. Hope your kid feels better. It sounds like he already is a little bit.
Yep. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. And we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.